HOA Karen in my neighborhood smashed my trash can 57 times with her shiny $60,000 Escalade, not by accident, on purpose. At 6:15 a.m., like it was part of her morning cardio. Every crack of plastic was a little reminder that in Summit Creek Meadows, power didn't belong to the people paying dues. It belonged to clipboards, fake titles, and a woman named Lydia Cross, who thought the rules only worked one way. What she didn't know was this: I'm an electrician, not a doormat. While she treated my driveway like a demolition derby, I was quietly reading Colorado statutes, city ordinances, and our precious HOA bylaws. By the time she finished turning my cheap plastic cans into confetti, I'd replaced them with something she definitely didn't see coming: a perfectly legal concrete trash can that would turn her Escalade into scrap metal and drag a whole embezzlement scheme into the light. Before I dive in, tell me this comment, your city and local time below, so I can see where all this HOA madness is reaching. And if you love seeing HOA Karens finally pick the wrong neighbor, go ahead and hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens at the end of this story. My name's Patrick Morgan, 45 years old electrician by trade, father, by stubborn devotion, and apparently the latest victim in Summit Creek Meadows' war on common sense. After my divorce, I bought the corner lot house here, thinking it would be a peaceful restart. Good schools, quiet cul-de-sacs, a place where my kids could bike to the park without dodging traffic or chaos. I didn't count on the HOA chaos coming to me instead. Summit Creek Meadows was the kind of neighborhood that looked perfect on a real estate brochure. Trimmed lawns, pastel mailboxes, manicured flower beds that smelled like money and fertilizer. But perfection comes with a price tag and a rulebook thicker than the Bible. The HOA president, Paisley Evans, treated the bylaws like scripture, and her right hand, Lydia Cross, treated enforcement like holy war. Lydia wasn't just any busybody. She was the self-appointed compliance officer, a title that doesn't exist in any HOA on planet Earth. She was the type who believed her pearl-white Escalade was a badge of authority. Early mornings, she power-walked with her tablet in hand, taking notes on lawns, paint colors, and trash bins like she was auditing the Pentagon. If your grass grew an extra inch, or your blinds weren't HOA-approved beige, you'd find a bright orange citation taped to your door before sunrise. My house sat right at the curve where the garbage trucks turned every Tuesday. City ordinance said trash cans had to be within 3 feet of the curb. That meant my bin by law had to sit in the perfect path of Lydia's morning parade. The first time it happened, I was making coffee while my son Caleb shouted, "Dad, what was that?" Then came the smell-burnt plastic and diesel fumes. I ran out barefoot to find my week-old trash can folded like an accordion, garbage scattered across the driveway like confetti after a sad parade. Lydia's SUV was halfway down the street, brake lights flashing once before she sped off. She had the audacity to roll down her window and call back. "These streets are so narrow, Patrick. You really should be more careful with placement." I stood there in my pajamas, holding a mangled lid like it was evidence from a crime scene. I told myself it was an accident. Everyone makes mistakes. I swept, bagged, and went to work late, smelling like old coffee grounds. 2 days later, it happened again. Same time, same crunch, same fake sympathy. By the end of the week, my driveway had turned into a plastic graveyard. When it happened a fourth time, my neighbor across the street, Mrs. Helen Ortiz, called me over that evening. She was 78, a retired teacher with sharp eyes and a soft voice. "She does it on purpose," she said quietly, standing on her porch in her floral nightgown. "I watch her every morning. There's plenty of room on the other side, but she swerves close to yours every time." That was the night something shifted. I wasn't mad yet, but I knew I was being tested. The next morning, I caught Lydia on her afternoon patrol. Clipboard, big sunglasses, lips pursed like she smelled something offensive. "Hey, Lydia," I started, keeping it polite, "about the trash can situation." She didn't even let me finish. "Patrick, I understand you're new to community living. These streets were designed for normal-sized vehicles. Perhaps you should consider placement timing adjustments." I blinked. "Placement timing adjustments?" She gave a sugary smile that could curdle milk. "Yes. Maybe put it out after I've gone by for my walk. We all have to compromise for the safety of the neighborhood." Safety, right. The only thing unsafe here was her sense of entitlement. That night, I stayed up researching every single HOA bylaw, municipal ordinance, and city code I could find. If Lydia wanted a war of rules, she was about to pick the wrong guy. I discovered 3 important things: trash cans placed for collection are personal property protected under state law. HOA jurisdiction ends at the property line. They can't enforce rules on public right-of-way. The bylaws didn't say anything about timing or can materials. By the time I was done, my printer had spit out 72 pages of legal ammunition. The next week, I replaced the broken bin again, positioned it exactly 3 feet from the curb, and installed a Ring doorbell camera aimed right at it. I told my kids, Grace and Caleb, to watch from the window the next morning. 6:15 a.m. The familiar diesel hum, the gleam of white paint under the rising sun. Lydia's Escalade glided into frame like a shark smelling blood, then crunch. This time I didn't rush out. I waited. She backed up, checked her bumper, and no joke smirked, then drove off. When I replayed the footage, it was perfect. You could see her face, the smirk, the deliberate turn of the wheel, the sound of plastic dying a slow, painful death. I took the video, the receipts, the city ordinance, and walked straight into the next HOA meeting. The air in that room was so thick with tension, it could have set off a sprinkler system. Paisley Evans sat at the head of the folding table, pearls gleaming under fluorescent light, voice, honey sweet but hollow. Patrick, we understand you have a concern. I connected my laptop to the projector. The footage played in silence, except for the sounds of crunching plastic and gasps from the audience. When it ended, I spoke clearly. City Code Section 8 to 305 states that trash receptacles must be within 3 feet of the curb. My placement complies exactly. HOA jurisdiction doesn't extend past my property line. And this, I pointed to the freeze frame of Lydia's face, is intentional property damage. Paisley's smile faltered. Lydia's jaw clenched. Paisley finally said, "We'll need time to review this matter." "Of course," I said. "I've already sent a copy to the city attorney's office and my lawyer just in case you need it." You could have heard a pin drop. When the meeting ended, Lydia stormed out first. I gathered my papers, nodded to Mrs. Ortiz, who winked and stepped into the chilly Colorado night. But Lydia wasn't done. As I crossed the parking lot, her Escalade rolled to a stop beside me. The passenger window lowered, and she leaned out, voice low and venomous. "You think you're clever. People like you move in and think rules don't apply. But I built this community. You're a guest here." Her words echoed in the cold air. "You're right," I said calmly. "And you just gave me one more violation to file harassment." Her tires screeched as she sped off. That night, Grace asked Dad, "Why does she hate us?" I didn't have an answer. I just promised she won't be bothering us much longer. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Lydia had power connections and a fragile ego, and I had just made her look like a fool in front of her queen, Paisley Evans. It wasn't a question of if she'd retaliate, it was a question of how. And when HOA Karens lose their grip on control, they don't back off, they double down. The next week felt like living under surveillance. Every time I walked out to my truck, I could feel Lydia's eyes on me through her bay window blinds. She'd stand there pretending to water her immaculate rose bushes while her phone camera glinted in the morning light. It was almost funny if it weren't so pathetic. But she wasn't just watching, she was planning. By Monday, a new letter arrived from the HOA. Certified mail. Thick paper, heavy envelope dripping with fake authority. Violation notice, improper trash receptacle placement causing traffic hazard. Signed, of course, by President Paisley Evans. Lydia's name wasn't on it, but I could smell her perfume between the lines. The letter claimed my trash can obstructed vehicular passage, citing HOA Section 4.7.3, something that didn't even exist in the bylaws. They gave me 72 hours to remedy the violation or face $50 daily fines. I laughed out loud right there on my porch. It wasn't just intimidation, it was incompetence dressed as authority, but I knew better than to throw the letter away. I kept it. Every letter, every timestamp, every petty threat was going into my growing file labeled HOA Harassment, Exhibit A through Z. That evening I walked over to Mrs. Ortiz's house with a cup of coffee. "They're doubling down," I told her. She frowned. "That woman doesn't know when to stop," she muttered. "When people like that feel cornered, they bite." She wasn't wrong. By Wednesday, Lydia's behavior escalated from irritating to absurd. She posted on the community app NeighborNet accusing me of being reckless and endangering children with hazardous placement of waste receptacles. The post blew up overnight. Some neighbors defended her, but most of them just rolled their eyes. One reply said, "You mean the same kids who skateboard down the middle of the street, please?" Still, the damage was done. Rumors spread fast in Summit Creek Meadows. People who once waved now looked away. I'd become the trash can guy. But if Lydia wanted a war of perception, I was more than happy to fight on her battlefield. I started documenting everything. Every morning, the Ring camera caught her SUV creeping past my driveway. Every afternoon, she'd stop her walk to snap new evidence photos. I even installed a secondary camera angled at her route from across the yard, hidden behind my mailbox. And sure enough, on Friday at 6:15 a.m., she struck again. This time, the footage caught her smirking as she veered closer to the bin, bumping it just enough to knock it over without leaving visible damage. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just harassment, it was control. Lydia wanted to prove she could dictate what I did with my property, where I placed my can when I breathed. And behind her stood Paisley Evans, whose polished calm made her far more dangerous. So I went deeper. That weekend, I turned my dining table into a research lab. Laptop open, coffee pot, full legal pads stacked like sandbags. I compared every HOA bylaw to Denver's municipal code and Colorado's property statutes. If they wanted to play lawyer, I'd play better. By midnight, I found it, the golden line that would end this nonsense. The association's authority shall not extend to public rights of way, which are subject to municipal jurisdiction. Translation: the curb wasn't theirs. The space where my trash can sat was owned by the city. I printed it, highlighted it, and taped it above my coffee maker. Every morning it reminded me I wasn't the one breaking rules, they were. Still, I wasn't naive. Bureaucracy doesn't lose gracefully. I expected pushback. But I didn't expect Lydia's next move. She weaponized sympathy. Monday morning, she parked her Escalade at the entrance of the subdivision, crying to whoever would listen that she'd been bullied by an aggressive male neighbor. She painted herself as a victim of intimidation, twisting reality like a soap opera villain rehearsing her next scene. Then came the real low blow. She approached my ex-wife Caroline under the guise of concern for the children. Caroline called me that night furious. "Patrick, the HOA says you're under investigation for harassment." "What's going on?" I nearly dropped the phone. Investigation by who? The gossip committee. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and that was Lydia's specialty: poisoning perception. I called a friend of mine, Ethan Cole, who worked at the city's code enforcement office. "Ethan, I need confirmation. Does the HOA have jurisdiction over trash placement?" He chuckled. "Only if they've somehow annexed Denver city property, which I'm pretty sure they haven't." He emailed me the official city ordinance with his signature attached. It was bulletproof proof. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. Lydia and Paisley sat up front, flanked by their usual loyalists, retired bankers, control freaks, and self-proclaimed community standards enthusiasts. I walked in with a folder thicker than a Bible and a quiet smile. Paisley adjusted her pearl necklace. "Patrick, you've requested to address the board regarding a violation." I nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I'd like to clarify who exactly has jurisdiction over my trash can." I handed copies of the city ordinance to each board member, then queued up the video on a projector. The footage rolled, Lydia's Escalade swerving, bumping, retreating. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few muffled laughs followed when she backed into her own mailbox during one of her drive-bys. Paisley tried to intervene. "We're not here to assign blame, Mr. Morgan. With all due respect," I cut in, "you already did. You fined me $50 a day based on a rule that doesn't exist. You've allowed one of your board members to use HOA resources for personal vendettas. And according to municipal law, this board has no authority over public right-of-way." The room buzzed. Lydia's face turned crimson. Paisley stammered something about review procedures, but it was too late. Neighbors started whispering. The illusion of control had cracked. After the meeting, Lydia stormed out first, muttering about lawyers and consequences. Paisley followed, her polite mask barely holding. Outside, under the buzzing parking lot lights, Lydia confronted me again. "You think this makes you look smart? People like you move in, ruin neighborhoods, lower property values. We don't want your kind here." That line hung in the cold air, ugly, venomous, loaded. I took a slow breath, pulled my phone from my pocket, and tilted the screen so she could see the red recording light glowing. "Thanks, Lydia. That's all I needed." Her expression froze, then twisted into something halfway between panic and rage. She turned, slammed her door, and peeled out of the lot. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of silence, no crunch, no screeching tires. For the first time in weeks, my trash can stood tall after collection day. But peace doesn't last long in HOA land. By Friday, I received another violation notice, this time for lawn height exceeding community standards. I measured it myself, 2.75 inches. The limit, 2.5. It was laughable. Transparent retaliation written in bureaucratic ink. But I played along. I trimmed the lawn, snapped photos, and mailed them to the HOA with the timestamp circled in red. If they wanted a war of paperwork, I'd bury them in it. I didn't know it yet, but Lydia was about to dig her own grave. Because once I followed the money trail behind all those violation fines and maintenance fees, I'd uncover something far uglier than broken plastic. And it would start with a conversation at a Home Depot contractor desk that would change everything. By the time November rolled in, my patience was thin as extension wire. Lydia had turned harassment into an Olympic sport. One week, she fined me for a non-compliant mailbox color. The next for unapproved decorative lighting. Then came a letter claiming my grass was inconsistent with community texture standards. Texture. She was literally policing textures now. It would have been hilarious if it hadn't been so calculated. Each violation came with a $50 fine, and each fine arrived 2 days after a neighborhood incident that made Lydia look foolish. The pattern wasn't random, it was retaliation. Still, I didn't bite. I documented everything. I took photos of my mailbox, which matched the HOA-approved heritage blue, my lights, factory fixtures listed in their own guideline PDF, and even my lawn, which had been measured down to the millimeter. I was building a case, not an argument. Then one morning at Home Depot, because where else do suburban wars begin, I met a man named Tommy Dalton, a concrete contractor with forearms like steel pipes and the patience of a saint. He was stirring coffee with a screwdriver when I told him about my trash can problem. He squinted, then grinned. "So she keeps smashing it with her SUV, huh? 57 times and counting." He chuckled. "Then stop buying plastic." "You ever consider concrete?" I blinked. "For a trash can, why not city code doesn't say what it has to be made of? Just says it has to contain trash and be movable. You reinforce it right, it'll survive anything short of a bulldozer." I laughed, but only halfway. Because deep down, I knew it was crazy enough to work. That night, after the kids went to bed, I stood in my garage staring at the cracked remnants of my latest plastic bin. The idea pulsed like electricity. I had leftover rebar from a rewiring job, a bag of concrete mix, and an urge for poetic justice. I got to work. Grace helped me line the mold with cardboard. Caleb held the flashlight while I mixed the concrete, the smell of wet cement rising in the cold air like the memory of something permanent. "Dad," Caleb said half joking, "you're seriously building a bomb-proof trash can?" I smiled. "Nah, son, just an accountability device." By midnight it was done, a hollow concrete core poured inside the plastic shell, reinforced with steel rods for weight distribution, drainage holes drilled at the bottom. From the outside it looked perfectly ordinary. Inside it was a fortress. When it cured, it weighed about 60 pounds. Not immovable, but enough to remind a certain HOA enforcer about Newton's third law. Tuesday morning I wheeled it out like normal. 3 feet from the curb, city compliant, perfectly aligned. Lydia's Escalade appeared right on schedule, purring down the street with that smug precision. She didn't slow down. The impact was cinematic, a deep thunk followed by the screech of metal against stone. The can didn't even wobble. Lydia's bumper crumpled like tinfoil. She slammed the brakes, sat there a few seconds, then reversed slowly. From my kitchen window, coffee in hand, I watched her get out, inspect the damage, and touch the dent with shaking fingers. She looked around paranoid before driving off more carefully this time. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Over the next week she tried again, different angles, slower speeds, same results. Each attempt left fresh scars on her Escalade. By the 4th time, her running board hung crooked, and one headlight was cracked. The neighborhood started noticing. Kids waited at the bus stop earlier to watch Trash Can Derby. Someone even started a betting pool on the community Facebook page, 50 cents, to guess how long before she gave up. Word spread fast. "Have you seen Lydia's car?" whispered one neighbor. "Looks like it went 12 rounds with a parking garage." Even Paisley Evans, usually poised as royalty, began avoiding public events. Without her sidekick's clean image, her authority started to crumble. But Lydia wasn't one to accept defeat gracefully. One night around 1130, my Ring camera caught her creeping into my driveway, flashlight in hand. She was crouching next to the trash can, tapping it, listening, even weighing it with what looked like a portable scale. I could barely keep a straight face watching the playback. Our local Karen turned detective. The next morning she escalated again. An HOA inspection notice was taped to my door. It demanded immediate access to verify exterior compliance and potential structural violations. Translation: she wanted inside my property to check the can. That's when I brought in my ace, Ava Sterling, the property rights attorney I'd consulted weeks earlier. I sent her the footage, the letters, and the bylaws. She called me 10 minutes later. "Patrick," she said, her tone, half amusement, half disbelief. "This is gold. They can't inspect private property without consent or a court order. This is textbook overreach and possibly harassment." She drafted a formal response letter, citing the Narrett v. Lakeside Village case, where the court ruled that HOAs can't conduct fishing expeditions on homeowners' land. I printed it, signed it, and taped it to my front door right under the inspection notice. The next morning, Lydia stood on the sidewalk reading it, jaw-tight, sunglasses trembling. I waved from the porch. "Morning, Lydia, legal sunshine today, huh?" She stormed off without a word. For a few days, the war went quiet. No letters, no posts, no tire marks near the curb. I almost started to believe she'd given up. Then came Friday. I was fixing a junction box in my garage when Caleb ran in yelling, "Dad, there's paint on the trash can." Sure enough, someone had spray painted a giant orange word across the front move. I looked at it for a long time. Then I laughed. Because paint washes off. But stupidity, that sticks. I pressure washed the graffiti clean in under a minute and posted the video on our HOA Facebook group with the caption, "Graffiti update removed faster than fake violations." It went mildly viral. Within hours, my post had over 80 comments, most of them supportive. A few even uploaded screenshots of their own questionable HOA fines. Suddenly, Lydia's reign of terror wasn't a secret anymore. By Saturday morning, she was unraveling. I saw her pacing outside Paisley's house, waving papers like a woman possessed. By Monday, she filed 3 separate complaints to the city, each about a dangerous cement structure obstructing public space. City Inspector Pete Larson showed up the next day, clipboard in hand, looking exhausted. "Sir," he said, "I have to ask what's in the trash can." "Garbage," I replied. He gave me a look. Regular garbage, regular. And some justice. He walked around the can, tapped it with his boot, jotted something on his form, then sighed. "It's a receptacle, not a construction. No code violations. Honestly, I wish all my cases were this easy." He left chuckling. I waved at the Ring camera and said, "Still compliant, Lydia." That night, she retaliated with something even more desperate. Anonymous emails to the HOA board claimed I was harassing women and threatening community peace. I recognized her phrasing immediately: formal, passive-aggressive, and riddled with misused legal terms like mens rea and tortious interference. But she didn't realize that I'd been quietly collecting everything: videos, letters, timestamps, audio files, witnesses. And as much as she thought she was in control, the cracks were spreading faster than her SUV repairs. Because just when she thought she was winning, I found something in the HOA's financial statements, something that would turn our little suburban feud into a full-blown criminal investigation. The discovery started almost by accident. I wasn't looking for fraud. I was just trying to understand where all the HOA's fine money went. The quarterly financial report, printed on cheap paper and stapled crooked, arrived in my mailbox like clockwork. Normally I'd toss it straight in the junk pile, but something caught my eye this time: a $23, 400 line item labeled Community Maintenance Front Range Facilities LLC. I'd never heard of them, and I'd been living here 3 years. Curiosity turned into obsession within an hour. I fired up my laptop, logged into the Colorado Secretary of State's business registry, and typed in the company name. The result hit like a jolt of live current. Front Range Facilities LLC, formed 6 months ago. 2 managing members, Paisley Evans and Ryan Evans. Same last name as the HOA president. Same home address listed on the company file. That wasn't just suspicious, that was illegal. I cross-referenced the HOA meeting minutes and saw something even worse: every major maintenance contract since the company's formation had gone to Front Range Facilities. Sidewalk repairs, landscape trimming, painting the community center. All awarded to Paisley's firm, approved by Paisley herself. 7 contracts each, under $10,000, just low enough to avoid triggering mandatory competitive bidding. My electrician's brain lit up. Patterns, timing, connection, fraud. I called Ava Sterling, my attorney, first thing the next morning. "I think I found why they're so desperate to shut me up," I told her. "Send me everything," she said. I scanned every document: contracts, bank deposit, slips, HOA minutes, even screenshots from the state registry, and sent them over. Her reply came 10 minutes later: "Patrick, this is textbook fiduciary misconduct and conflict of interest. You may be dealing with criminal fraud." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glowing screen. Lydia's trash can crusade suddenly made sense. She wasn't just being petty, she was protecting the racket. If a single homeowner proved selective enforcement or harassment, it could trigger an audit. An audit that would expose how she and Paisley had been siphoning HOA dues for months. And my indestructible trash can, that was the spark that lit the fuse. I spent that night transforming my garage into a war room. The walls became a map of corruption, printed emails, contracts, and photos pinned with red string like I was plotting a heist. Except this time, the vault was full of lies, not money. When my daughter Grace walked in with a sandwich, she stopped short. "Dad, this looks like something out of a crime show." "Sweetheart," I said, smiling tiredly, "it kind of is." By Thursday, I'd assembled a small but loyal task force. Mrs. Ortiz brought homemade cookies and moral outrage. Luis Herrera, our maintenance guy, quietly handed me invoices that didn't match the payments in the financial reports. Danielle Brooks, the one decent board member left, risked her seat by forwarding internal emails showing Lydia pushing those contracts through. Every time we questioned an expense, Danielle whispered over coffee Paisley already had a justification typed out, word for word identical for each job. It was like she'd rehearsed it. I nodded. That's because she did. This was planned. The next step was tricky timing. Ava advised patience. We need to gather everything. If we go public too early, they'll destroy evidence. So I documented in silence. Weeks of quiet data gathering, while Lydia kept unraveling. She filed 2 more bogus complaints, non-conforming garden decor and unapproved bird feeder. I filed each letter neatly into my ever-expanding folder. Then one Saturday morning, I heard her arguing with Paisley in the cul-de-sac. Their voices carried across the crisp Colorado air. "I told you to keep him distracted," Paisley hissed. "Now the whole neighborhood's talking. He's obsessed. He's filming everything," Lydia snapped. "Do you want me to run him over next time?" "Don't be stupid," Paisley muttered. "We just need to make him look unstable." I hit record on my phone through the window screen. By the end of the weekend, I had 40 minutes of audio capturing their paranoia. Meanwhile, the neighborhood's attitude had shifted. People once afraid of Lydia were now fed up. "She fined me for leaving Halloween decorations up for 3 days, said Mark Simmons, a retired firefighter. "You take her down, Patrick. We'll back you up." The idea of resistance spread like wildfire. Someone created a private Facebook group called Summit Creek Transparency, and within a week half the neighborhood had joined. Folks started posting photos of their own violation letters, all signed by Lydia. Some dated the same day as the maintenance contracts. Every HOA Karen's worst nightmare collective outrage. And then poetic justice struck again, courtesy of my concrete masterpiece. On a foggy Tuesday morning, I heard that familiar thud followed by a shriek of metal. Lydia had tried again, maybe hoping the new coat of paint made the can weaker. The sound was so loud it set off her own car alarm. By the time I stepped outside, half the block had gathered. Her Escalade's front bumper hung by a thread, one headlight shattered. Lydia stood there, mortified, her face beet red. Mrs. Ortiz crossed her arms. "Maybe you should ticket yourself for obstruction, dear." The laughter that followed could have powered the streetlights. Lydia sped off, leaving behind a trail of coolant and humiliation. I uploaded the footage that afternoon to the Facebook group captioned, "Trash Karma" in 4K. Within hours, it had 100 reactions and a dozen shares to other HOA pages. It wasn't just local gossip anymore, it was evidence. Paisley called an emergency meeting that Friday. Only board members were supposed to attend, but word leaked fast. By the time it started, the community center parking lot was full of angry homeowners with folding chairs and cameras. Paisley tried to maintain composure behind the podium, her pearl necklace catching the fluorescent light. "Certain allegations have circulated online. About you stealing from us," shouted Mark Simmons from the back. Paisley's lips tightened. "These are baseless rumors, spread by individuals attempting to undermine community harmony." "Like Lydia," someone else yelled. "She's been terrorizing everyone for months." The room buzzed like a live wire. Paisley tried to gavel it down, but the sound of her tapping was drowned out by voices demanding accountability. Then Danielle stood up, trembling but resolute. "President Evans, are you prepared to disclose your financial interest in Front Range Facilities LLC?" The room went dead silent. Paisley froze. Lydia's eyes darted toward the exit. I rose slowly, holding up a thick binder. "Because if not, I can do it for you," Paisley stammered. "This meeting is adjourned." But the damage was done. Cameras flashed, murmurs spread, and for the first time, Paisley Evans looked genuinely afraid. That night, I sent every document to Ava. She replied in all caps, "Do not engage further. You just won." It didn't feel like victory yet. I knew from experience when power starts slipping, desperate people do stupid things. And I was right. The next morning, I woke up to flashing blue lights outside. 2 officers stood by Lydia's Escalade, which now had a detached bumper, a cracked windshield, and apparently false insurance paperwork filed the night before. She'd tried to claim the damage was from a road hazard. Unfortunately for her, I'd already sent a month's worth of footage to the insurance fraud division. They denied her claim on the spot. One officer knocked on my door, smiling slightly. Mr. Morgan, we're just here to confirm that you're the homeowner in this footage, I nodded. That's me, and that's my very legal trash can, he chuckled. Sir, I think this is the first time we've seen justice served in concrete form. I laughed. You're welcome to use that in your report. That day marked the turning point. Paisley's empire was cracking. Lydia's car was totaled, her credibility demolished. And I had the receipts literally and legally to burn them both to the ground. What started as petty harassment over a plastic trash can had evolved into a full-blown HOA corruption scandal, and I wasn't done yet. If Lydia Cross thought wrecking her SUV would slow her down, she underestimated her own stubbornness and my patience. The week after her failed insurance stunt, she started using the one weapon every HOA tyrant clings to when their power slips bureaucracy. It began with 3 new violation notices in one day. One for unapproved mailbox ornamentation. Apparently, the tiny American flag sticker my son had placed was offensive. One for unauthorized exterior lighting fixture, the same motion sensor I'd had since move-in day, and another for lawn, discoloration inconsistent with community standards. I actually laughed out loud at that last one. It had snowed the night before. Each notice came stamped with the HOA seal and Paisley's signature in smug blue ink. Lydia was clearly drafting them, but Paisley was the one giving them legitimacy. They were both circling the wagons, desperate to reassert control. But I had no intention of being steamrolled by paperwork. I printed every notice, dated them, photographed each part of my property, and attached copies of the HOA's own bylaws, showing why every claim was nonsense. Then, using a small dose of poetic justice, I mailed them a violation letter. Subject notice of selective enforcement and abuse of authority. Formal complaint. I included a 20-page packet with photo evidence, legal citations, and a very calm introduction. Per Section 9.2 of the HOA Charter, all members must be treated equitably. Please explain why only my property receives citations for issues demonstrably present across multiple neighboring homes. I CC'd the city attorney's office, the Department of Regulatory Agencies, and just for fun, a local journalist named Melissa Park, who had recently run a segment titled HOA Nightmares When Rules Become Weapons. By Wednesday, I had their attention. Paisley emailed me personally at first. Her tone dripped with false professionalism. Mr. Morgan, we appreciate your passion for community integrity. However, escalating matters to external authorities may reflect poorly on the neighborhood's reputation and property values, I replied within 2 minutes. Reputation and property values suffer more from fraud and harassment than from accountability, Mrs. Evans. I'm simply protecting both. She didn't reply. But Lydia sure did. That Friday, she stopped her morning inspection walk right in front of my house phone camera out, recording herself narrating. Documenting continued non-compliance, she muttered loud enough for my security mic to catch. This homeowner is creating a hostile environment, possibly unsafe. I stepped out onto the porch with my coffee. Good morning, Lydia. Make sure you get my good side. Her face tightened. You're harassing me. I'm standing on my porch. You're the one trespassing with a camera. Community right-of-way, she snapped. City right-of-way, I corrected. I checked with the county clerk. You might want to refresh your geography. She marched off, muttering something about lawyers. By then, our private Facebook group, Summit Creek Transparency, had grown to nearly every homeowner. The mood had shifted from quiet frustration to open rebellion. Neighbors were sharing their own violation letters, each with Lydia's handwriting, the same font, the same phrasing, unapproved mailbox shade, unauthorized potted plant, improper curtain visibility, and then someone no one admitted who uploaded my video compilation of Lydia's Escalade collisions, titled HOA Karen versus the Immovable Trash. Can it spread like wildfire? Within a day, over 1,000 views. Comments poured in from neighboring communities. She's the type who'd find Jesus for parking a donkey on the street. Man built a tank disguised as a trash can. I salute you. Serve justice in concrete form. Colorado edition. Lydia tried to get the video taken down, citing privacy violation, but since it was filmed on public property, YouTube ignored her complaint. That was when the cracks in the HOA fortress became fractures. Danielle Brooks, our reluctant board member, reached out in secret. Patrick, she said, voice trembling through the phone. Paisley's panicking. She's been meeting privately with Lydia and a law firm, Prescott and Associates. They're trying to backdate conflict of interest disclosures for front-range facilities. I sat back, stunned but not surprised. They're faking paperwork, yes. Lydia's even bragged about it to Gerald, the treasurer. She said once they file those forms, any accusation of fraud becomes a misunderstanding. I exhaled slowly. That's tampering with official records. Danielle hesitated. I know. But if I come forward, they'll force me off the board. Not if the entire neighborhood stands behind you, I said. That's when we decided to go public. We scheduled a community meeting for the following Tuesday, technically a social event, so they couldn't cancel it under HOA rules. I invited Melissa Park from Channel 7 News. She agreed instantly, sensing blood in the water. Meanwhile, I spent the weekend fortifying my evidence. I pulled bank records showing HOA payments to Front Range facilities. I had time-stamped emails showing Paisley approving contracts she'd personally benefit from, and I had Lydia's voice on tape bragging about keeping him too busy with fines to ask questions. Every cable I'd wired, every circuit I'd repaired, it all led to this moment. I wasn't fixing houses anymore. I was rewiring a system. Monday night, while prepping for the meeting, my daughter Grace walked into the garage, turned war room. She looked at the cluttered walls of documents, red string, and sticky notes. Dad, she said softly, you're kind of scaring me. You look like one of those conspiracy guys. I laughed. Maybe. But this one's real. She smiled faintly. Promise me this ends soon. It will, I said. Tomorrow everything changes. And it did, but not the way I expected. Because just as I was printing, the last set of documents' headlights flashed through my window, Lydia's Escalade, again. Only this time, she wasn't alone. Another car idled behind hers, a black sedan with a magnetic logo on the door, Riverside Security Services. She'd actually hired private security. For a trash can, 2 guards stepped out, flashlights sweeping across my yard. One of them called out routine patrol on behalf of the HOA. I stepped onto the porch, calm but cold. You're on private property. I didn't authorize this. The taller guard shrugged. We were told there's an ongoing safety concern. With what? A concrete cylinder. He didn't answer. Lydia stood behind them, arms crossed, smirking. I turned to my doorbell camera and waved. Don't worry, it's recording. That wiped the smirk off her face. The guards retreated after 10 awkward minutes, muttering about miscommunication. By dawn, I sent the footage to Ava, who nearly laughed herself off her chair. She just committed criminal trespass, and you've got her on camera supervising it. The following morning, a notice from the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies arrived, apparently triggered by my earlier complaint packet. They were launching a formal review of Summit Creek Meadows, HOA's financial operations. It was the first domino. That evening, Melissa Park texted, "Got your files. This is explosive. I'm coming tomorrow with a crew." For the first time in months, I slept soundly. Not because I was free of trouble, but because the truth was finally rolling downhill, and I didn't have to push anymore. The avalanche had started. The night before the big community meeting, Summit Creek Meadows didn't feel like the quiet suburb it once pretended to be. Cars were parked along both sides of the street. Porch lights glowed like stage spotlights, and whispers moved from one driveway to another like the wind carrying gossip. Everyone knew something was coming. You could smell it in the air, that mix of fear and anticipation before a storm. I sat in my living room, laptop open, surrounded by boxes of labeled evidence. Each folder was a chapter of the same story, Lydia and Paisley's abuse of power disguised as community management. Fraud, falsified paperwork, harassment, and intimidation, all signed, sealed, and time-stamped. Grace came downstairs wearing her hoodie and carrying her phone. "You're really going through with this, huh?" "Someone has to," I said, double-checking the flash drive that contained every video, photo, and scanned contract. "If they win this time, they'll do it again to someone else." She leaned against the doorframe. "You're not scared," I smiled. "Of course I'm scared, but fear only works if you hide from it." She gave a little nod. "Then I guess you should be on the front page tomorrow." She wasn't wrong. By 6 p.m. the next day, the Summit Creek Community Center parking lot was packed. Homeowners who hadn't attended a single meeting in years were dragging in folding chairs and camping coolers like it was a neighborhood festival. Only this time, the entertainment wasn't fireworks, it was accountability. I parked at the far end, stepped out with my folder under my arm, and spotted Melissa Park, the investigative journalist from Channel 7, setting up her camera crew near the door. She smiled when she saw me. "Mr. Morgan," she asked, extending her hand. "I've seen the footage. It's going to make for quite a story." "Glad to hear it," I said. "Just make sure you spell concrete trash can correctly. That's the real hero." She laughed. "You'd be surprised how often justice comes in weird shapes." Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with tension. Paisley Evans sat at the long folding table up front, pearls shining under the fluorescent lights, pretending to read notes she clearly wasn't focused on. Lydia sat 2 seats away, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors, like she was trying to hide her black eye, or maybe just her shame. A lawyer from Prescott and Associates sat between them, whispering instructions into their ears. Danielle Brooks, our lone honest board member, was pacing near the back, holding her own thick binder. When she saw me, her face relaxed slightly. "Patrick, you ready?" "Born ready," I said, though I didn't expect to be leading a rebellion with PowerPoint slides. At 6:30 sharp, Paisley tapped the microphone. "Let's bring this meeting to order." Her voice trembled. That was new. "Before we begin," she continued, "I want to remind everyone that disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. We are here to maintain civility." From the back, someone shouted, "Like you maintain the finances." The room erupted in laughter and applause. Paisley's cheeks flushed pink. "Fine," she muttered. "We'll begin with community concerns. Mr. Morgan, I believe you requested time to speak." I stood walking toward the projector with the quiet confidence of a man who's already won. "That's correct, Madam President." Melissa's cameraman zoomed in. The lights dimmed. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "this isn't about trash cans anymore. This is about truth." The first slide clicked on Lydia's Escalade smashing into my bin, captured in glorious 1080p. Gasps and chuckles filled the room. "Over the past 6 months," I continued, "I've received 12 false violation notices, all citing non-existent rules. I've been stalked, recorded, and harassed. But what's important isn't what they did to me, it's why." I clicked again. A spreadsheet appeared showing HOA payments to Front Range Facilities LLC, line after line of transactions signed by Paisley Evans. According to Colorado nonprofit law, HOA officers must disclose any financial interest in entities doing business with the association. Mrs. Evans, your name and home address match the business registration for Front Range Facilities, the same company receiving tens of thousands of dollars from our dues. Paisley's lawyer stood. "Objection, this is slander," I turned toward him calmly. "Not slander, counselor. Documentation. I've provided copies to the Department of Regulatory Agencies, the City Attorney's Office, and Channel 7 News. You'll have your chance to respond once the audit begins." The audience murmured louder now. Phones came out, flashlights flickering as people snapped photos of the screen. Then I played the audio recording. Paisley's voice came through clearly. "Keep him distracted. If he keeps filing complaints, we'll never get the next invoice approved." And then Lydia's, "Don't worry, I'll make him too busy fixing fines to notice." Silence. Even the lawyer stopped breathing. Paisley's hand shook. Lydia's sunglasses came off, eyes wide like she'd seen a ghost. Finally, Danielle stood up. "Mrs. Evans, you never disclosed any ownership stake in Front Range Facilities, did you?" Paisley tried to speak but only managed a squeak. Then I moved Danielle, said clearly to immediately suspend both Mrs. Evans and Miss Cross pending independent audit and legal review. Applause broke out before the gavel even hit the table. Paisley shouted, "You can't do this." "Actually, we can," Danielle interrupted, flipping open the bylaws. Section 3.5. The board may suspend officers under suspicion of misconduct by majority vote. She looked around. All in favor, hands went up across the room. One by one, the homeowners people Lydia had bullied, fined, or ignored raised their hands. Melissa Park caught it all on camera. Paisley's lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently, but she knew it was over. Lydia stood abruptly, muttering, "This is a witch hunt," and tried to leave, but Officer Ryan Delgado, the same one who'd handled her insurance fraud report, was standing at the door. "Ma'am," he said, holding up a clipboard, "I'm going to need you to stay. We have questions regarding ongoing insurance and harassment investigations." Lydia froze mid-step. "You can't." "We can," he said simply. "You've been served." Paisley sat motionless, her pearls trembling against her collarbone. The meeting adjourned in chaos. Homeowners flooded the aisles, some shouting, others crying, most just stunned that justice had finally walked through the door. Outside cameras flashed as Melissa interviewed residents. "How do you feel about tonight's outcome?" she asked one man. "Vindicated," he said, "and proud of that concrete can." When she turned to me, I just smiled. "You can pave over honesty for a while," I said, "but eventually it cracks through." That line made the 10 o'clock news. The next morning, Summit Creek Meadows was unrecognizable. Lydia's SUV sat abandoned in her driveway bumper, dangling like a loose tooth. Paisley's mailbox overflowed with certified letters and subpoenas. The HOA office door bore a new sign, "Under audit" by Colorado state authorities. Danielle texted me later that afternoon, "You did it. They're both officially suspended." But the victory didn't feel like revenge. It felt like relief, like the neighborhood had finally exhaled after holding its breath for years. That night, I dragged my famous concrete trash can up to the curb one more time. The street was quiet, stars bright over the Rockies. Grace came outside handing me a mug of cocoa. You know, she said you could probably sell that thing online. Call it the Karen Killer can. I laughed. Nah, some legends belong right where they stand. She leaned against my arm. So, now when I looked down the peaceful street where no SUVs prowled, no letters threatened, and no fake smiles hid malice, now I said we rebuild. But this time we do it honest. Because for the first time in Summit Creek Meadows, truth wasn't the rule they enforced, it was the one they finally had to live by. You'd think that after being suspended, investigated, and publicly humiliated, Paisley Evans and Lydia Cross would crawl into their suburban caves and stay quiet. But you don't understand HOA Karens until you've seen what they do when cornered. The morning after the board meeting, I woke up to an email titled, "Urgent Community Notice Misinformation Alert." It was a rambling manifesto sent by Paisley to every homeowner, written like she was auditioning for a political thriller. Dear residents, recent events have been fueled by malicious lies and doctored evidence designed to discredit your HOA leadership. Certain individuals, you know who you are, have engaged in criminal defamation and unlawful wiretapping. We urge the community to remain calm and disregard fake news. Attached was a blurry screenshot of me standing at the meeting projector. My name circled in red. The woman had gone from president to full-blown conspiracy theorist overnight. Within an hour, the neighborhood group chat was exploding. Defamation, she embezzled from us, wrote Mrs. Ortiz. She's lost her mind, added Mark Simmons. Someone should tell her that the 1,990 seconds called they want their scandal email back. It might have been funny if it weren't so dangerous. People like Paisley don't just lose gracefully, they implode and try to take everyone with them. By noon, Lydia was back on her morning rounds, clipboard in hand, pretending nothing had happened. I watched from my porch as she scribbled notes in front of Mrs. Rodriguez's house, ignoring the fresh state audit in progress notice taped to the HOA office door. When she reached my property line, she froze. The concrete trash can sat gleaming under the autumn sun, unbothered as ever. I lifted my coffee mug in greeting. Morning, Lydia. How's the job search? She glared at me, lips trembling. You'll regret this, Patrick. I already regret living near you, I said cheerfully. She stormed off, muttering something about lawyers. What she didn't know was that her threat had just become reality against her. That same day, my attorney Ava called with a tone I'd learned meant this is about to get good. Patrick, she said, the Department of Regulatory Agencies finished their preliminary review. Front Range Facilities is under criminal investigation for fraud, and the state auditor confirmed your documentation matched every discrepancy. I blinked. So it's official. It's official, she said. They're cooked. I hung up, exhaling for what felt like the first time in months. The noise, the fights, the endless paperwork, it was all finally paying off. But peace, I soon learned, wasn't in Lydia's vocabulary. The next morning around 3 a.m., my security system sent a motion alert. I checked the feed half awake, expecting a raccoon. Instead, I saw the unmistakable silhouette of Lydia Cross crouched beside my trash can again, flashlight in one hand, something metallic in the other. At first, I thought she was vandalizing it again. Then I realized what she was holding: a wrench. She was trying to open it. Maybe she thought she'd find proof it was illegal or some secret evidence hidden inside. I watched her tug and pull only to end up flat on her back when the lid wouldn't budge. I called the non-emergency line, already saving the footage. By the time an officer arrived, she was gone, but the wrench, a shiny Craftsman 14-inch, lay abandoned beside the can like a dropped weapon. The officer chuckled as he bagged it for evidence. I've seen car break-ins, porch pirates, you name it. But a woman breaking into a trash can, that's a new one. Concrete attracts all kinds of people, I said. The next morning, the footage hit the Facebook group. Caption caught trying to inspect my illegal garbage monument at 3 a.m. The comments were pure gold. Maybe she thought there was buried treasure inside. This woman needs a hobby that doesn't involve felonies. That can has more plot twists than Netflix. Paisley tried to defend her partner in crime, posting Mrs. Cross was conducting after-hours compliance verification. Danielle replied instantly, at 3 a.m., with a wrench, sure, January. That one comment alone got 500 laughing emojis. By midweek, the local news picked it up. Melissa Park's segment aired under the headline, HOA President and Enforcer Under Investigation After Trash, Confused Exposes Embezzlement Scheme. She stood in front of the community center, mic in hand, while footage of Lydia's 3 a.m. escapade played beside her. What began as a petty neighborhood dispute has now sparked a state-level investigation into misuse of HOA funds, selective enforcement, and harassment. Residents call it the concrete revolution. My phone buzzed non-stop, with texts from friends and even old clients. "You're famous, man," one said. Another wrote, "Legendary trash can energy." The fame was surreal, but not everyone was amused. That night, Paisley's husband Ryan came to my door. He looked exhausted, eyes sunken, tie askew. "Mr. Morgan," he said quietly, "we need to talk." I gestured to the porch. "Go ahead." He rubbed his forehead. "Look, my wife made mistakes. I didn't know about the contracts, I swear. She pulled me in for the paperwork because she needed a second signature. She's losing everything. She should have thought of that before stealing from 127 homeowners," I said flatly. He sighed. "She's talking about leaving the state, selling the house, starting over in Florida with her sister. Lydia, too." I didn't respond. "Please," he said, lowering his voice. "If there's any way to keep this civil, maybe withdraw your part in the criminal complaint." I laughed softly. "You're asking me to bury evidence so she doesn't face consequences, Ryan. That's exactly how this mess started." He swallowed hard, realizing the conversation was over. "Then I hope you can live with what happens next," he muttered, walking away into the dark. For a moment I almost felt pity. Almost. The following week, the audit results went public. $47, 0 inches maintenance overpayments, $11, 0 inches missing, petty cash, and 3 falsified invoices tied directly to Paisley's family company. The HOA board voted unanimously to dissolve her presidency and remove Lydia from all committees. Their access to HOA funds was revoked immediately. The county prosecutor's office issued subpoenas for both of them within 48 hours. The neighborhood exploded in celebration. Someone taped a party hat onto my trash can. Kids drew chalk arrows on the street, pointing to it with captions like, "The Legend." Grace came home from school that day, grinning ear to ear. "Dad, everyone's talking about you. Even my civics teacher showed the news clip in class." I smirked. "Guess we're famous now." She tilted her head. "You think it's over?" I stared at the glowing sky, the orange Colorado sunset reflecting off the smooth gray surface of that concrete monument. "Almost," I said. "But some people don't know how to quit until they're in handcuffs." And I was right. Because the very next morning, as if on cue, a loud knock shook my front door. When I opened it, Officer Delgado stood there again, this time with 2 more deputies behind him. "Mr. Morgan," he said, smiling faintly, "you might want to come outside." I followed him to the curb where a pearl-white Escalade sat, idling bumper hanging loose, windshield cracked, and the driver's seat empty. On the dashboard was a handwritten note, all caps, "Congratulations on destroying my life. I hope you're happy." The car reeked of gasoline. One officer shouted, "Get back," as they cut the ignition and radioed dispatch. Apparently, Lydia had tried to torch her own vehicle in front of my house as a final act of suburban protest. It didn't work. The tank had been nearly empty. They found her 2 blocks away, sitting on the curb, mascara running down her face. When they handcuffed her, she just kept muttering. "It's his fault, he started it." But everyone in Summit Creek Meadows knew the truth by then. I didn't start the war, I just refused to lose it. 2 days after Lydia's meltdown and attempted trash can arson, Summit Creek Meadows finally felt quiet. The kind of silence that comes after a storm has flattened everything false and left only what's real. I stood in my driveway watching the tow truck haul away her battered Escalade, the last monument to her obsession, and couldn't help thinking that poetic justice sometimes drives on 4 wheels. Paisley Evans, meanwhile, was unraveling in slow motion. The local news had run her face on repeat for 3 days straight, under the headline, "HOA President Under Investigation for Fraud and Harassment." The footage from the board meeting, the crowd cheering, the handcuffs, clicking my concrete trash can gleaming under fluorescent lights, had gone viral. Over 200,000 views. That week, the community center filled again, not for outrage this time, but for rebirth. Danielle Brooks, our new interim president, stood at the front papers, trembling slightly in her hands. "The state audit has concluded," she said. "The funds have been recovered. $47. 000 will be returned to the HOA account, and the remainder of the fines issued by Miss Cross have been declared void." The room erupted into applause. Mrs. Ortiz actually started crying. "We can finally breathe again," she said, hugging her husband. I sat in the back row with Grace quietly sipping burnt community center coffee, watching neighbors smile for the first time in months. The tension that had once hung over our cul-de-sac was gone, replaced by relief laughter and that distinct scent of freedom you only notice when it's been missing too long. Paisley's husband Ryan didn't show up that night. He'd sold their house within the week. The listing description was painfully ironic. charming modern home in a peaceful neighborhood with strong community leadership. Peaceful, sure. Leadership definitely not theirs. Lydia Cross faced 3 charges: harassment, trespassing, and attempted property destruction. Her lawyer tried to argue emotional distress, but the mountain of video evidence turned that defense into dust. The judge ordered her to undergo psychological counseling, pay restitution, and stay at least 500 feet from my home. The next morning, I found an envelope in my mailbox, no name, just handwriting I recognized. Inside was a check for $12, $500 and a short note, for the damage and the humiliation. Consider this closure. R.E. Ryan Evans had paid up quietly. Probably hoping to save what was left of his reputation, I cashed it. Not out of greed, but because every cent symbolized accountability finally catching up to arrogance. The settlement money didn't go to me alone. We decided as a neighborhood to use most of it for something that would turn the whole saga into something constructive, literally. Danielle proposed it first. Let's rebuild the playground. The kids deserve something good to remember this year by. So we did. The entire neighborhood showed up that Saturday: hammers, paint rollers, wheelbarrows. I brought my truck and the old mixer. Luis poured the concrete foundations while Grace and the other teens painted murals on the fence. And right there beside the swing set, we placed a new addition, a perfectly smooth miniature concrete trash can about half the size of the original. A plaque beneath it read, to remind us that truth doesn't bend and justice doesn't flinch. When the local paper covered the story, they called it the Clean Sweep Project. For once, that phrase didn't make anyone roll their eyes. Over the following months, the HOA transformed. Danielle's leadership brought transparency meetings, digital voting, and open budget reports. We voted to rename the annual community barbecue to the Concrete Can Cookout, a running joke that somehow became a tradition. Grace started helping the new HOA with community design, proof that she'd inherited more of my stubborn streak than I realized. And every so often, we'd catch a new homeowner walking past the famous concrete can in front of my driveway, stopping to take a selfie. At first, it annoyed me. Then I realized it was history. Because the can wasn't just a piece of concrete anymore. It was proof that one person, when pushed too far, could change an entire neighborhood, not by yelling louder, but by standing stronger. Then one afternoon, as I was rewiring an outlet for a neighbor, Melissa Park stopped by again. "We're doing a follow-up piece," she said. "The station loved your story, how a small act of defiance exposed an entire system." She paused, smiling. "They're calling it the man who outsmarted the HOA." "How does it feel?" I chuckled. "Feels like the HOA finally met its match." She grinned. "And the trash can," I patted the concrete lid, "still undefeated." That line made the evening broadcast. Again, by winter, the case had gone national. Advocacy groups used it as an example of homeowner rights reform. Legislators in Denver even drafted a bill nicknamed the Morgan Act, aimed at tightening oversight for HOA boards and mandating conflict of interest disclosures. I didn't set out to make law. I just wanted peace. But sometimes, peace is what happens when you refuse to be silent. As snow began falling that December, I stood in the yard with Grace, watching lights blink across the neighborhood. The same houses that once glared at me behind blinds now waved from porches. The same HOA that once fined me for existing now printed my name on their annual newsletter under Community Hero Award. And for the first time in years, Summit Creek Meadows actually lived up to its name. Sometimes life tests us with small injustices, a rude neighbor, a false accusation, a system that thinks it's untouchable. It's tempting to walk away, to shrug and say, "That's just how it is." But the truth is, every change begins with someone who refuses to back down. I didn't fight because I wanted revenge. I fought because silence lets bullies win. Because even in the smallest battles, a trash can, a letter, a driveway, the principle matters. When you stand your ground with facts, patience, and integrity, you don't just win for yourself. You set a precedent for everyone who comes after you. So if you've ever felt powerless against arrogance or injustice, remember my concrete can. It didn't move. It didn't break. It just stood there until the truth crashed into it. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I want to hear your stories of standing up when it mattered. And if you believe justice still belongs to the little guy, hit subscribe. Because here, every story ends the same way the bully always hits the wall.